The auction block stood in the merciless Missouri sun, and Katherine Lawson had never felt more exposed in her 21 years of life. She stood with her head held high despite the circumstances, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, her blue calico dress mended at the sleeves. The crowd of men gathered in the dusty square of St. Joe, Missouri, on this sweltering July afternoon in 1875, and their eyes crawled over her like insects. Her father had gambled away everything they owned, and when the debts came due to Victor Strand, the most ruthless saloon owner in 3 counties, he had offered the only thing of value he had left: his daughter. The auctioneer, a portly man with sweat staining his vest, called out numbers that made Katherine's stomach turn. She was livestock to these men, property to be bartered and sold. She scanned the crowd, looking for any hint of mercy, any face that might suggest kindness. Most were rough frontier men, prospectors, ranchers with weather-beaten faces and calculating eyes. Some she recognized from her father's gambling circles, men who had watched her family's descent into ruin with predatory patience. Then her eyes landed on a man standing at the back of the crowd. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jaw set in a hard line. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a white shirt, and a gun belt that sat comfortably on his hips like he knew how to use it. Unlike the others, he was not looking at her with greedy speculation. His hazel eyes held something else entirely, something that looked almost like anger, but not directed at her. $500, called out a gray-haired rancher she recognized as Edmund Cross, a man known for working his hired hands nearly to death. $600, countered another voice, younger, eager. Katherine's hands trembled at her sides. She clenched them into fists, digging her nails into her palms. She would not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. $1,000. The voice was deep, steady, and came from the tall man at the back. The crowd turned to look at him, and a ripple of surprise moved through the gathered men. It was an enormous sum, more than most of them would see in a year of hard work. The auctioneer's eyes lit up with greed. 1,000 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 1,100? Silence fell over the square. Edmund Cross shook his head and spat into the dust. The eager young man who had bid earlier turned his pockets inside out in a helpless gesture. No one could match that price, and everyone knew it. 1,000 going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the back. Katherine felt her knees weaken but forced herself to remain standing. The tall man walked forward through the crowd, which parted before him. Up close, she could see the dust of long trails on him, the signs of a man who lived most of his life in the saddle. He had a strong, honest face, with lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun. He counted out the money to Victor Strand himself, who had positioned himself near the auction block to ensure he got his payment. Strand was a snake in human form, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed obscene in the frontier town. He counted the bills with practiced fingers, a satisfied smile on his thin lips. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Jackson, Isaac Jackson," the man said flatly, his tone making it clear he found nothing pleasurable about the transaction. "Well, Mr. Jackson, she is all yours." Her father signed all the papers legal and proper. Strand tucked the money into his jacket and walked away, already calculating how to spend his windfall. Isaac Jackson climbed the steps to the auction block. Katherine took an involuntary step back, her breath catching in her throat. He stopped, holding up one hand as if calming a frightened horse. "Miss, I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice meant only for her ears. "I need you to come with me, and then we need to talk somewhere private." Katherine studied his face, searching for deception, but found none. She had learned to read men in her father's gambling halls, watching them bluff and scheme. This man's eyes were clear, direct. Whatever his intentions, he was being honest with her in this moment. "Do I have a choice?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not right now, you do not," he admitted. "But you will. I promise you that." Something in his tone made her believe him. She nodded once and allowed him to help her down from the auction block. His hand was warm and calloused, the hand of a working man. He did not grip her tightly or possessively, but steadied her with surprising gentleness. He led her through the dispersing crowd to where two horses waited at the hitching post outside the general store. One was a sturdy bay gelding, clearly his riding horse. The other was a pretty sorrel mare with kind eyes and a white blaze down her face. "Can you ride?" Isaac asked. "Yes," Katherine said. Her father had owned horses once before he gambled them away too. "Good. That mare is gentle, but she has spirit. Her name is Rosie." He untied both horses and handed Katherine the sorrel's reins. Then, to her surprise, he swung into his own saddle and simply waited, making no move to force her to mount. Katherine looked at the horse, then at the man, then at the town square behind her. She could run. She could try to disappear into the alleys and back streets of St. Joe. But where would she go? She had no money, no family who would take her in. Her father had burned every bridge and she had gone up in flames with them. At least this man had kind eyes. She mounted the sorrel, settling into the saddle with practiced ease. Isaac nodded approvingly and turned his horse toward the edge of town. They rode in silence through the dusty streets, past the saloons and boarding houses, past the church where Katherine had once attended Sunday services with her mother, back when her mother was still alive and life made sense. They rode for perhaps half an hour, following the Missouri River north, until they reached a stand of cottonwood trees that provided shade and relative privacy. Isaac dismounted and tied his horse loosely, giving the gelding enough lead to graze. Katherine did the same with Rosie, her movements automatic while her mind raced with questions and fears. Isaac removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. In the dappled shade, his face looked younger, less weathered. He met her eyes directly and said, "Miss Lawson, I bought you from that auction so I could set you free." Katherine stared at him. "What? You heard me right. I do not hold with slavery, and I surely do not hold with what was happening back there. A woman is not property to be bought and sold, no matter what her father signed or what debts he owed." His voice was firm, passionate even. "I rode into St. Joe this morning to buy supplies, heard about the auction, and well, I could not let it stand. So I spent near about everything I have to make sure you did not end up with someone like Edmund Cross." Katherine felt dizzy. She reached out and steadied herself against a tree trunk. "You spent $1,000 just to free me. You do not even know me." "I know enough," Isaac said quietly. "I know you did not choose this. I know you were standing up there trying to be brave while men treated you like cattle. That is all I needed to know." Tears pricked at Katherine's eyes, and this time she could not hold them back. She had been so scared, so certain that her life was over, that she would end up as some cruel man's property, worked to death or worse. And this stranger, this cowboy with kind eyes, had saved her without asking for anything in return. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Men do not do things like this, not without wanting something." Isaac's expression softened. "I suppose you have reason to think that, given what your father put you through, but I am not asking for anything except that you trust me enough to let me help you figure out what comes next." "What comes next?" Katherine repeated. "I have nothing. No money, no family worth claiming, no prospects. You just spent a fortune on me, and now you are saying you want nothing in return." I am saying you are free, Isaac said firmly. What you do with that freedom is up to you. But it is getting on toward evening, and you need somewhere safe to stay, at least for tonight. I have a camp about 5 miles north of here on my way back to my ranch. It is not much, but it is safe, and I have supplies. You can rest there, and tomorrow we can figure out a better plan. Katherine tried to think clearly through the storm of emotions. Every instinct she had developed in the gambling halls told her to be suspicious, to look for the angle, the catch. But she had also developed instincts about reading people, and this man was either the best actor she had ever met, or he was genuinely trying to help her. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? Spend everything you have for a stranger? Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. 5 years ago, my sister Martha got mixed up with a gambler. He made promises, convinced her to run away with him, and when his luck turned bad, he sold her to a brothel in Kansas City to pay his debts. By the time my family found out and tracked her down, it was too late. She had taken laudanum, too much of it. The doctor said it might have been an accident, but I know better. She could not live with what had been done to her. Katherine felt her breath catch. I am so sorry. I could not save Martha, Isaac continued, his voice rough with old pain. But when I heard about that auction, I knew I could not walk away. Maybe it does not make sense, spending all my money like that. My ranch is not much, and that $1,000 was supposed to buy breeding stock for next season. But some things matter more than cattle. They stood in the shade of the cottonwoods, the river burbling quietly nearby, and Katherine felt something shift inside her. This man had known terrible loss, and instead of letting it make him bitter, he had used it to fuel an act of desperate kindness. She thought of her own losses, her mother dead 3 years now, her father lost to gambling and drink long before that. She had felt her heart hardening, building walls against the cruelty of the world. But maybe, just maybe, there was still room for trust. Thank you, she said softly. I will accept your help, at least for tonight, and I promise I will find a way to repay you someday. Isaac shook his head. No debt, Miss Lawson. You owe me nothing. Katherine, she said, if we are going to be traveling together, even for a night, you should call me Katherine. A small smile touched his lips, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his serious face, making him look almost boyish. Isaac, he said, though most folks just call me Ike. They remounted and continued north along the river, riding at an easy pace that allowed Katherine to study her unlikely savior. He sat his horse like a man born to the saddle, moving with the animal's rhythm unconsciously. His gun belt was well worn but clean, his rifle secured in a saddle scabbard. Everything about him spoke of capability and self-reliance. Tell me about your ranch, Katherine said after a while, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own churning thoughts. Isaac glanced back at her. It is not much to tell. About 300 acres in the hills west of here, in the Platte Purchase region. Small herd, maybe 40 head right now. I run it myself mostly, though I hire a couple of hands during roundup and branding season. Got a small house, a barn that needs work, a creek that runs year-round. It is not grand, but it is mine. It sounds nice, Katherine said, and meant it. The idea of a place that belonged to someone through hard work rather than cards and luck appealed to her deeply. It keeps me busy, Isaac admitted. Ranching alone is not easy, but I like the work. Like waking up and knowing that what I build stays built, that nobody can take it away with a bad hand of poker. Katherine flinched at the reference, and Isaac immediately looked contrite. I am sorry, he said quickly. That was thoughtless. No, Katherine said. It is true. My father could not stop, even when he started losing. Especially when he started losing. He kept thinking the next hand would turn it around, that his luck had to change. He lost our house, our horses, my mother's jewelry, and when there was nothing left to lose, he lost me too." "That was his failing, not yours," Isaac said firmly. "A man who would do that to his own daughter is no kind of man at all." Katherine felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had spent so long feeling ashamed, as if her father's failures were somehow her fault, as if she should have been able to stop him. Hearing Isaac state so plainly that the fault lay with her father alone was like a weight lifting. They reached Isaac's camp as the sun was starting to set, painting the Missouri sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a simple setup beneath a cluster of oak trees, with a fire ring, some supplies stored in canvas bags, and 2 bedrolls laid out a respectful distance from each other. Katherine noticed immediately that there were indeed 2 bedrolls, and that Isaac must have purchased or prepared the second one before the auction. He had planned to help whoever was sold, even before he knew who it would be. Isaac swung down from his horse and began unsaddling the bay gelding. Katherine did the same with Rosie, her fingers remembering the familiar motions from years past. They worked in companionable silence, brushing down the horses and hobbling them to graze. "I will get a fire started," Isaac said. "There is a stream just through those trees if you want to wash up. I have soap and a towel in the blue bag." Katherine took him up on the offer, grateful for the chance to clean the dust and sweat of the awful day from her skin. The stream was cold and clear, running over smooth stones. She knelt at its edge and splashed water on her face, then dampened the towel and wiped her arms and neck. It felt like washing away not just the grime but the memory of all those eyes on her, all those men calculating her worth like she was a thing rather than a person. When she returned to camp, Isaac had a small fire burning and coffee brewing in a battered pot. He was slicing salt pork and hardtack, simple trail fare but more than Katherine had eaten all day. Her stomach growled audibly, and Isaac smiled. "Not fancy, but it is filling," he said, handing her a tin plate. They ate as darkness fell and the stars began to emerge overhead. The night sounds of the Missouri wilderness surrounded them, crickets and tree frogs singing their evening chorus, an owl hooting somewhere in the distance. Katherine could not remember the last time she had felt so peaceful, despite the strangeness of her situation. "What will you do?" Isaac asked eventually, his voice quiet in the darkness. "When tomorrow comes, I mean. Do you have anyone you can go to, any family or friends who might take you in?" Katherine considered the question honestly. "No family to speak of. My mother's people disowned her when she married my father, said he was no good. They were right, as it turns out, but I doubt they would welcome me now. As for friends, well, people tend to avoid you when your father gambles away everything and drags your name through the mud along with his." Isaac poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the night sky. "You could come to the ranch," he said carefully. "I mean just temporarily, until you figure out what you want to do. I could use the help, truth be told, and I could pay you fair wages. You would have your own space in the house, and I give you my word I would treat you with respect." Katherine's heart beat faster. "You would do that? After already spending $1,000, you would give me a job too. Like I said, I could use the help. Ranch work never ends, and there are things I am not good at, like cooking that does not taste like boot leather, or keeping the house from looking like a barn. And you would be earning your keep, so there is no charity in it." But there was charity in it, Katherine knew. Kindness and generosity that she had nearly forgotten existed in the world. She looked at Isaac across the fire, his face half in shadow, and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. "I accept," she said. "And Isaac, thank you for everything. You saved my life today, whether you want to call it that or not." He met her eyes, and in the firelight they looked almost gold. "You are welcome, Katherine, and for what it is worth, I think you are pretty brave. Not many people could have stood up there the way you did and kept their dignity." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. She ducked her head, unused to genuine compliments. "I did not feel brave. I felt terrified." "Brave is not the same as fearless," Isaac said softly. "Brave is being scared and doing what you have to do anyway." They talked for a while longer, carefully sharing pieces of their pasts. Isaac told her about growing up in Illinois, the youngest of 4 children, and how he had come west after his sister's death, needing distance from the memories and the grief. Katherine spoke haltingly about her mother, a gentle woman who had loved books and music, and had tried to shield Katherine from her father's worst impulses for as long as she could. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. Isaac banked the fire and they retired to their separate bedrolls. Katherine lay looking up at the stars through the oak branches, marveling at the turn her life had taken. This morning she had woken in her father's shabby rented room, knowing the auction was coming and feeling like she was walking toward her own execution. Tonight she lay in a camp with a stranger who had shown her more kindness than her own father had in years. And tomorrow she would ride to a ranch in the hills and start a new life. She fell asleep with tears on her cheeks, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, they were not entirely tears of sorrow. The morning dawned clear and cool, with mist rising from the river. Katherine woke to the smell of coffee and found Isaac already up, tending the fire and frying bacon in a cast iron pan. He looked up and nodded a greeting, his dark hair tousled from sleep. "Morning. Hope you slept all right." "Better than I expected," Katherine admitted. It was true. Despite sleeping on the ground, despite the strangeness of everything, she had slept more soundly than she had in weeks. They ate a quick breakfast and broke camp efficiently. Isaac's movements were practiced, economical, and Katherine found herself studying the way he worked, filing away information about this new life she was stepping into. He treated his belongings with care, she noticed, but nothing was precious. Everything was used, functional, chosen for purpose rather than appearance. They rode west from the river, into rolling hills covered in prairie grass and scattered groves of trees. The morning sun warmed Katherine's back, and Rosie moved beneath her with a smooth, comfortable gait. Isaac rode slightly ahead, but frequently looked back to check on her, making sure she was keeping up comfortably. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some jerky and dried apples. They sat in the shade of a lone hickory tree, looking out over the sea of grass that rolled away to the horizon. "It is beautiful," Katherine said softly. "I have lived in Missouri all my life, but I have never been out this far." "Wait until you see the ranch," Isaac said. "The way the sun sets behind the western hills, turning everything purple and gold. That is what sold me on the land when I first saw it." "How long have you had it?" Katherine asked. "Coming up on 3 years now. Bought it from a widow whose husband died in the war. She wanted to go back east to be with her daughter, and I had just enough saved up from working cattle drives to make her an offer. The house was half falling down and the range was overgrazed, but I saw the potential." Katherine heard the pride in his voice and smiled. "You built it back up." "Still building," Isaac said. "That is the thing about a ranch. It is never finished. There is always something that needs fixing, improving, expanding. But I like that. I like working towards something." They rode on through the afternoon, and Katherine felt herself relaxing into the rhythm of travel. The horror of yesterday's auction began to feel distant, like something that had happened to someone else. She knew the trauma would not disappear so easily, that there would be nights when she woke in a cold sweat, remembering those eyes on her. But for now, in the sunlight, riding through beautiful country with a good man leading the way, she let herself simply be. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Isaac pointed ahead. There, that line of trees marks Copper Creek. The ranch house is just beyond. Katherine felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. This was it, the place where she would try to build something new from the wreckage of her old life. She urged Rosie forward, and they crested a gentle rise. The ranch spread out below them in a shallow valley. The house was modest but well built, constructed of logs chinked with mud, with a stone chimney rising from one end and a small covered porch. The barn was larger than the house, red painted with white trim, and beyond it, Katherine could see the shapes of cattle grazing in a fenced pasture. Everything looked neat and orderly, the result of hard work and careful attention. "It is wonderful," Katherine said, and meant it. Isaac's face lit up with a pleased smile. "Come on, let me show you around." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached, a dog came bounding up from the barn, barking a greeting. It was a medium-sized mixed breed, brown and white spotted, with an enthusiastically wagging tail and bright, intelligent eyes. "That is Scout," Isaac said, swinging down from his horse. "He is supposed to help with the cattle, but mostly he helps with being friendly." Katherine laughed as Scout bounded over to sniff at Rosie, then at her skirts as she dismounted. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, and the dog leaned into her hand with a contented sigh. Isaac showed her the barn first, a structure he had clearly built with his own hands, with room for several horses, a tack room and a hayloft. Then the chicken coop, where half a dozen hens pecked and clucked, and the small vegetable garden behind the house, currently producing tomatoes, beans, and squash. Finally, he led her to the house itself. Isaac paused at the door, suddenly looking uncertain. "Like I said, it is not much, and I am not the best housekeeper, but it is solid and it keeps the weather out." He pushed open the door and Katherine stepped inside. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a ladder leading up to a sleeping loft. There was a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, a cook stove that looked relatively new, and shelves holding dishes and supplies. Everything was indeed dusty and somewhat disorganized, but the bones of it were good. "The loft is where I have been sleeping," Isaac said, gesturing upward. "I figured you could have it, and I will set up a cot down here. There are curtains I can hang to give you privacy. Or, if you prefer, I could sleep in the barn and you could have the whole house." Katherine turned to look at him. "Isaac, this is your home. I am not going to exile you to the barn." "The loft will be fine, and I appreciate the curtains for privacy." He looked relieved. "All right then. Let me get your things and I will show you where everything is." Over the next hour, Isaac gave Katherine a thorough tour of the house and its workings. He showed her the pantry, stocked with flour, cornmeal, beans, and preserved goods. The root cellar, dug into the hillside behind the house, was cool and dark, lined with shelves that held potatoes, onions, and jars of canned vegetables and fruits. He explained the daily routine of the ranch, the needs of the animals, the chores that kept everything running. Katherine listened carefully, asking questions and making mental notes. She had never run a household like this before. Her father's rented rooms in St. Joe had been cramped and mean, requiring little upkeep. But she was a quick learner, and she was determined to earn her place here. That evening, Katherine made dinner while Isaac went to check on the cattle. It was simple fare: fried salt pork and beans with fresh tomatoes from the garden and cornbread baked in the cook stove. But when Isaac came in, dusty and tired from his work, He looked at the set table with something like wonder. "This looks amazing," he said. "It is nothing special," Katherine demurred, but she felt pleased nonetheless. They ate together as darkness fell outside, and Katherine found the domesticity of it all strangely soothing. This was what normal life looked like, she realized. Not the chaos of gambling halls and mounting debts, not the fear and uncertainty that had colored her last few years. This was what it meant to have a home. After dinner, Isaac hung curtains around the loft area, giving Katherine her own private space. He brought up a lamp, fresh linens for the bed, and a pitcher and basin for washing. "If you need anything, just call down. I am a light sleeper." "Thank you," Katherine said, "for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know what else to say." Isaac paused at the top of the ladder, his expression serious. "You do not have to keep thanking me, Katherine. We are helping each other now. That is how this works." After he climbed back down, Katherine changed into the nightgown Isaac had purchased for her in town, along with a few other basic necessities. She had protested the expense, but he had been firm. "You need clothes, and I need a working partner who is properly outfitted. No arguments." She lay in the narrow bed in the loft, listening to the sounds of Isaac settling in below, the scrape of the chair as he sat to pull off his boots, the quiet sounds of him preparing his own sleeping space. It should have felt awkward, sharing this intimate space with a man she barely knew. But somehow it did not. Instead, it felt safe, like maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could begin to heal. The days that followed fell into a natural rhythm. Katherine woke early and made breakfast while Isaac tended to the animals. They ate together, discussing the day's work, and then each set about their tasks. Katherine took over the household duties, cleaning the neglected house from top to bottom, organizing supplies, mending Isaac's worn clothes. She tended the garden, collected eggs from the hens, and experimented with cooking, determined to make meals that were better than simple trail fare. Isaac worked the ranch, riding out to check on the cattle, repairing fences, maintaining the barn and outbuildings. But he always made time to teach Katherine about ranch life, showing her how to milk the cow he kept for fresh dairy, how to churn butter, how to read the weather and the land. She learned to ride better than she ever had before, spending hours in the saddle as Isaac taught her to herd cattle, to watch for signs of sickness or injury in the animals. They worked well together, Katherine discovered. Isaac was patient and encouraging, never making her feel stupid when she made mistakes. And Katherine was observant and determined, picking up new skills quickly and always looking for ways to be more useful. But beyond the work, something else was growing between them. Katherine found herself watching Isaac when he did not notice, admiring the strength in his shoulders as he lifted hay bales, the competent way his hands moved as he worked leather or mended tack. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which he did more and more often. She noticed the sound of his laugh, warm and genuine, when Scout did something particularly silly. And Isaac, though he tried to be respectful and keep his distance, could not help noticing Katherine. The way she hummed while she worked, old hymns from her childhood. The way she talked to the chickens when she collected eggs, giving each hen a name and personality. The way evening light caught in her dark hair and made her eyes seem to glow. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was strong and kind and resilient. She had been through something terrible and was rebuilding herself piece by piece, and Isaac found himself in awe of her courage. They talked in the evenings after the work was done, and they sat on the porch watching the sun set. Katherine told Isaac about her mother, how she had taught Katherine to read from the few precious books she owned, how she had made their shabby rooms feel like home with wildflowers in jars and songs sung while working. Isaac told Katherine about his family back in Illinois, about the ranch he hoped to build, big enough to support a family someday, prosperous enough to hire hands and free him to focus on breeding quality stock. "You ever get lonely out here?" Katherine asked one evening, watching the purple and gold sunset Isaac had promised. Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I did," he admitted. "Before you came. I would go weeks without seeing another soul sometimes, except when I rode into town for supplies. I told myself I liked the solitude, that it was what I needed after everything with Martha. But the truth is, this place was feeling less like a home and more like a hiding place." "And now," Katherine asked softly. Isaac turned to look at her, his hazel eyes serious. "Now it feels like a home again. Because of you." Katherine felt her breath catch. There was something in his gaze that made her pulse race, something warm and tender and full of promise. But before either of them could say anything more, Scout barked at a rabbit in the yard, breaking the moment, and they both laughed at the interruption. But the moment, and the feeling behind it, did not disappear. It was still there the next morning when their hands brushed as Isaac handed Katherine a cup of coffee. It was there in the middle of the day when Katherine brought lunch out to the field where Isaac was working, and he smiled at her like she was the best thing he had seen all week. It was there in the evening when they sat close together on the porch, not quite touching but aware of every inch of space between them. 3 weeks into Katherine's time at the ranch, a summer storm rolled in from the west. Isaac saw it coming that afternoon, great black clouds piling up on the horizon, and hurried to secure everything that might blow away or get damaged. Katherine helped, bringing in tools and equipment, making sure the animals were safely penned. The storm hit at dusk with tremendous force. Wind lashed the house, driving rain against the windows in sheets. Thunder boomed so loud it rattled the dishes on the shelves, and lightning turned the world outside into a stark landscape of light and shadow. Scout whined nervously by the door, and Katherine found herself unconsciously moving closer to where Isaac stood watching the storm. "It is a big one," Isaac said, having to raise his voice over the roar of wind and rain. "But the house is solid. We will be fine." As if to contradict him, a particularly violent gust of wind hit the house, and Katherine heard something crack outside. Isaac grabbed a lantern and his coat. "I need to check the barn. Make sure the roof is holding and the animals are not panicking." "I am coming with you," Katherine said immediately. "Katherine, it is dangerous out there, which is why you should not go alone." Isaac looked like he wanted to argue, but another crack of thunder decided him. He handed her a coat, and they ventured out into the storm together, bent against the wind, the rain soaking through their clothes in seconds. The barn door had blown open and was banging in the wind. Isaac struggled to secure it while Katherine went to calm the horses, who were stamping and neighing in their stalls. She found Rosie particularly agitated, eyes rolling white with fear. Katherine went into the stall, heedless of the danger of being in a confined space with a frightened horse, and put her hands on the mare's neck, speaking softly, steadily. "Easy, girl. Easy now. It is just noise and wind. You are safe here. I have got you." Isaac finished securing the door and turned to find Katherine in the stall, her hand steady on Rosie's neck, her voice calm despite the chaos outside. The mare was settling, her breathing evening out, responding to Katherine's fearless presence. In that moment, watching this woman who had been sold like an animal just weeks ago now standing strong and unafraid, comforting a frightened creature, Isaac felt something click into place in his heart. He was falling in love with her. Maybe he had been since the moment he saw her on that auction block, holding her head high despite her terror. Maybe it had happened gradually, over shared meals and evening conversations and the simple domesticity of their daily life. But in this moment, in a storm-lashed barn with rain drumming on the roof, he knew it with absolute certainty. The storm raged through the night but did no serious damage. In the morning, Katherine and Isaac surveyed the ranch in the clean, washed sunlight. A few branches had come down and part of the garden fence needed repair, but overall they had weathered it well. "We make a good team," Isaac said, looking at the minor damage with satisfaction. "Most of this I can fix in an afternoon." Katherine smiled. "We do make a good team." Their eyes met and held, and Katherine felt that same pull she had been fighting for days, the urge to step closer, to touch him, to see if his lips were as soft as they looked. She saw her own desire reflected in Isaac's eyes, but he made no move toward her, and after a moment they both turned back to their work. But the tension between them was building and they both knew it. It was there in every glance, every accidental touch, every moment of shared laughter. Katherine caught herself daydreaming while working, imagining what it would be like to kiss Isaac, to be held in his strong arms. She had never felt this way about anyone before. The young men who had courted her before her father's gambling destroyed their prospects had been boys, shallow and easily scared off. Isaac was a man, solid and real and unafraid, and Isaac lay awake at night on his cot, listening to Katherine breathe in the loft above him, and fought with himself. He wanted her with an intensity that sometimes shocked him. But she had been through a trauma, had been treated as property and bought like livestock. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel pressured or obligated. She was living in his house, dependent on him for food and shelter. Any move he made would be complicated by that power imbalance, and Isaac would rather cut off his own hand than take advantage of Katherine's vulnerability. So they circled each other, both wanting, both holding back, both waiting for the right moment that never quite seemed to come. A month after Katherine arrived at the ranch, a neighbor stopped by. Roy Henderson owned the property to the north, a larger spread with several hired hands. He was a weathered man in his 50s, fair-minded and well-respected in the area. Isaac had bought a few head of cattle from him when he first started the ranch. "Isaac, good to see you," Roy called out as he rode up. Then his eyes landed on Katherine, who was working in the garden, and his eyebrows rose. "Roy," Isaac said, shaking the man's hand. "This is Katherine Lawson. She is helping me run the place." Roy tipped his hat to Katherine. "Madam, pleased to meet you," Katherine nodded politely. "Mr. Henderson." "Just Roy, please," the older man said. Then to Isaac, "Could I have a word?" They walked a short distance away, and Katherine tried not to obviously eavesdrop, but she could not help catching some of the conversation. "Now, Isaac, I do not mean to pry into your business," Roy was saying, "but you know how folks talk. A young woman living out here with you, unmarried, no family, well, there are those who are going to make assumptions." "Let them," Isaac said flatly. "Katherine is here because she needs a place to stay and I need help with the ranch. Anyone who wants to think poorly of that can keep their opinions to themselves." "I am not saying I think poorly of it," Roy said quickly. "You are a good man, Isaac, and I am sure your intentions are honorable, but I am thinking of the young lady. Reputation matters, especially for a woman. If she is going to make a life out here, she needs folks to think well of her." Isaac was silent for a moment, and Katherine held her breath, waiting to hear his response. "You are right," Isaac said finally. "I have not been thinking about that. I have been so focused on making sure she was safe and had what she needed, I did not think about how it would look to others." "The simplest solution would be to marry her," Roy said bluntly. "If you are planning to keep living together under one roof, Marriage would make it proper and shut down any gossip before it starts. Katherine felt her heart hammer in her chest. She should not be listening to this, but she could not make herself move away. I cannot ask her to marry me just to satisfy social conventions, Isaac said firmly. Katherine has been through enough. She was sold against her will a month ago. The last thing she needs is to feel pressured into a marriage she does not want because of gossip. Does she not want it, though? Roy asked. Have you asked her? No, I have not asked her. Roy, I care about Katherine, care about her a great deal, but it would not be right to propose when she is living here dependent on me. How could she say no even if she wanted to? She has nowhere else to go. So you are just going to let this situation continue, both of you miserable and pretending you do not have feelings for each other? Isaac laughed, but it sounded pained. That obvious, is it? Son, I have been married 32 years. I know what two people look like when they are trying not to fall in love and failing at it. Life is short, Isaac. Do not waste it being noble when you could be happy instead. They talked for a few more minutes. Then Roy took his leave. Katherine busied herself with the garden, pretending she had heard nothing, but her mind was racing. Isaac had feelings for her, real feelings. He was holding back not because he did not want her, but because he was trying to do right by her, trying not to take advantage. Her heart swelled with affection for him, for his honor and his care. That evening they were quieter than usual, both lost in their own thoughts. Katherine made dinner and they ate in near silence. Finally, as Katherine was washing the dishes, Isaac spoke. Katherine, we need to talk. She dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. All right. Isaac ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Roy Henderson made me realize something today. I have not been thinking about your reputation, about how it looks for you to be living here with me. People are going to talk, and that could make things hard for you if you ever want to. I do not know, meet someone, get married, have a normal life. Katherine felt a stab of disappointment. This was not what she had hoped he would say. So you want me to leave? No, Isaac said quickly. That is not what I want at all, but I do not want to be selfish either. I want what is best for you, Katherine, even if that means you leave here. Katherine took a deep breath. She had never been one to play coy or hide her feelings. Life was too short and uncertain for games. Isaac, what if what is best for me is staying here with you? He looked up at her, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. Katherine, I do not want you to feel obligated. You are free to go any time to make your own choices. I would never hold you here against your will. I know that, Katherine said softly. She crossed the room to stand in front of him. That is one of the many reasons why I am choosing to stay. Isaac, you saved me from a terrible fate. But more than that, you have given me a home, a purpose, respect. You have treated me like I matter, like my thoughts and feelings are important. Do you have any idea how rare that is? You do matter, Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. You matter more than you know. Then stop trying to protect me from my own choices, Katherine said. I am a grown woman and I know my own mind. I want to be here with you. Not because I owe you or because I have nowhere else to go, because this is where I choose to be. Isaac stood, and suddenly they were very close, so close Katherine could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Katherine, I need you to understand something. I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I am falling in love with you if I am being honest. But I cannot act on those feelings if you feel pressured or obligated in any way. Katherine felt joy burst in her chest like fireworks. You are falling in love with me. Yes, Isaac said simply. I try not to. I try to keep my distance, to be honorable and respectful, but I cannot help it. You are brave and strong and kind, and when you smile, it lights up my whole day. I love the way you talk to the chickens, and the way you hum when you are cooking, and the way you were not afraid to walk into that stall with Rosie during the storm. I love everything about you, and it is driving me crazy trying to pretend I do not." Katherine laughed, and it felt like relief, like a door opening onto a sunlit field. "Isaac, I am falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks. I was just waiting for you to notice." "You were?" Isaac looked stunned. "Yes, you impossible man. Why do you think I have been making your favorite foods and finding excuses to spend time with you? I thought I was being obvious." Isaac reached out and gently cupped her face with his calloused hands. "So if I kissed you right now, you would not feel pressured or obligated." "If you do not kiss me right now," Katherine said, "I am going to be very disappointed." Isaac smiled, that transformative smile she loved, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. Catherine's eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms, as fast as her own. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as weeks of denied desire found an outlet. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for so long." "So have I," Katherine admitted. "Isaac, I meant what I said. I choose this. I choose you. I do not care what people say or think. This is where I want to be." Isaac pulled her into his arms, and Katherine melted against him, feeling safe and cherished and home. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, marveling at the fact that they were finally admitting what had been obvious to everyone, including themselves, for weeks. "Roy suggested we should get married," Isaac said eventually, his voice rumbling in his chest where Catherine's ear was pressed. "To make it proper so people would not gossip." Katherine pulled back to look at him. "Is that what you want, to marry me to avoid gossip?" "No," Isaac said firmly. "If I marry you, it will be because I love you and want to spend my life with you, not because of what the neighbors think." "But Katherine, we have only known each other a month. I do not want to rush you into anything." "You are not rushing me," Katherine said. "But I understand if you want to wait to be sure." Isaac smiled. "I am already sure, but I want you to have time to be sure too. We have all the time in the world now. Let us just enjoy being together, and when the time is right, I will ask you properly." Katherine stood on her toes and kissed him again, soft and sweet. "I will be here when you do." That night, Katherine climbed to her loft with a heart so full she thought it might burst. She lay in bed, touching her lips, remembering the feeling of Isaac's kiss. Below, she could hear him moving around, settling in for the night, and the sounds that had been simply domestic before now felt intimate, precious. Everything had changed, and yet nothing had. They still worked the ranch together, still ate meals and talked about their days. But now there were stolen kisses in the barn, lingering touches as they passed each other, and long evenings on the porch where they sat close together, Isaac's arm around Catherine's shoulders, planning their future. Isaac courted her properly, despite their unconventional living arrangements. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, and once, after a trip to town, surprised her with a book of poetry he had noticed her looking at longingly in the general store. Katherine baked his favorite cakes and mended his clothes with extra care, and sometimes, when he was working outside, she would just watch him from the window, marveling that this good, strong man had chosen her. Summer deepened into late August, and the work of the ranch was constant but satisfying. They brought in the hay, working long days in the hot sun, Isaac swinging a scythe while Katherine raked and bundled. They worked on the garden, preserving and canning food for the winter to come. They rode out together to check the cattle, and Isaac taught Katherine the finer points of ranching, trusting her judgment and respecting her growing skill. One evening, they rode to the top of the highest hill on the property, a spot Isaac had shown her early on. From here, you could see the entire ranch spread below, the house and barn looking small and neat, the cattle dots of color in the green pastures, and the western sky ablaze with another spectacular sunset. They sat on the grass, their horses grazing nearby, and watched the light show nature provided. Isaac had his arm around Katherine, and she leaned into him, content in a way she had never imagined possible. "Katherine," Isaac said softly, "I want to ask you something." She turned to look at him and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When I bid on you at that auction," he continued, "I only wanted to set you free. I never imagined that in doing so I would find the person I had been looking for my whole life. You are my partner, my best friend, the person who makes this ranch feel like a home. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a single small diamond. "It is not fancy," he said. "I spent most of my money buying your freedom, but I wanted you to have something that was just yours, something that represents my promise to you." Katherine's eyes filled with tears. "Isaac, Katherine Lawson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner in all things for as long as we both live?" "Yes," Katherine said, her voice breaking on a sob of joy. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it was always meant to be there. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting the world in gold and crimson light. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in St. Joe, the same church Katherine had attended as a girl. Roy Henderson stood up as Isaac's best man, and Roy's wife Margaret, a kind woman who had welcomed Katherine warmly once she understood the true nature of her relationship with Isaac, stood up for Katherine. It was a small ceremony, attended by a handful of neighbors and friends Isaac had made in his years in the area. Katherine wore a simple white dress that Margaret had helped her make, and Isaac wore his best clothes, clean and pressed. As they stood before the minister and made their vows, Katherine could not help but think of where she had been just 2 months ago, standing on an auction block in this very town, certain her life was over. Instead, it had just been beginning. "I, Isaac James Jackson, take you, Katherine Marie Lawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I, Katherine Marie Lawson, take you, Isaac James Jackson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Isaac kissed her, Katherine felt like she was floating, buoyed by joy and love and the incredible gift of a second chance. They held a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with food and music and dancing in the barn. Roy brought his fiddle and played lively tunes while couples danced on the swept barn floor. Isaac danced with Katherine, holding her close, their eyes only for each other. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her around. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be," Katherine answered honestly. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Roy pulled Isaac aside. "You did good, son. She is a fine woman and you two are lucky to have found each other." "I know," Isaac said. "Thank you, Roy, for everything, for your friendship and your advice." "That is what neighbors are for," Roy said. "You ever need anything, you just ask. That goes for both of you now." Finally, they were alone. Isaac carried Katherine over the threshold of their home, making her laugh and set her gently on her feet inside. The house was dim, lit only by the fire in the hearth and a few candles. It looked magical, romantic, transformed from a simple ranch house into something special. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jackson," Isaac said softly. "It already was home," Katherine replied, "but now it is perfect." That night, they came together as husband and wife, and it was tender and sweet, and everything Katherine had hoped it would be. Isaac was gentle, patient, attentive to her needs and responses. They learned each other slowly, carefully, with love and respect and growing passion. And when they finally lay tangled together in the bed that was now theirs, Katherine felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Isaac replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now and always." The years that followed were full of both challenge and joy, as any life must be. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily under their joint efforts. Isaac expanded the herd, and Katherine proved to have a natural talent for breeding decisions, spotting quality animals and understanding bloodlines in a way that impressed even experienced ranchers. They hired their first ranch hand the second year of their marriage, a young man named Timothy who was eager to learn and proved to be a hard worker. With his help, they were able to take on more cattle and improve the property further. Katherine found her place in the small community around them, making friends among the other ranch wives and becoming known for her kindness and her excellent baking. She sometimes thought about her father, though he never tried to contact her. She heard through gossip that he had left St. Joe shortly after the auction, running from more debts. The news did not surprise her, and she found she could think of him now without the sharp pain of betrayal. He was a weak man who had made terrible choices, but his failures had led her to Isaac, and for that, she could not entirely regret them. 2 years after their wedding, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, unable to keep the secret even for a day. His face went from shock to wonder to joy in the space of a heartbeat, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Katherine asked, though she could see that he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Isaac said. "Katherine, you have given me everything. A home, a partnership, love, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in the spring of 1878 on a warm May morning with wildflowers blooming across the prairie. The labor was long and difficult, but Katherine was strong, and Margaret Henderson was there to help, experienced and calm. When Katherine finally heard her baby's first cry, she wept with relief and joy. Isaac came in from where he had been pacing on the porch, his face anxious. But when he saw Katherine, exhausted but smiling, holding their son, his expression transformed into pure wonder. "A boy," Katherine said softly. "We have a son." Isaac knelt beside the bed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The infant's fingers curled around his, gripping tight, and Isaac laughed, the sound choked with emotion. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Katherine, I do not even have words." They named him James Daniel Jackson after Isaac's father and Katherine's mother, whose maiden name had been Daniel. Little James was a healthy, happy baby with his mother's dark hair and his father's hazel eyes. He brought new life and laughter to the ranch, and both Isaac and Katherine marveled at how much love they had to give, how their hearts had expanded to make room for this new person. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around the needs of a growing child as well as the demands of the ranch. Katherine managed to balance motherhood with her ranch duties, often carrying James in a sling while she worked, or setting him in a safe spot where she could watch him while she cooked or gardened. Isaac was a devoted father, patient and playful. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving designs into the wood. He sang James to sleep with old cowboy songs, his deep voice gentle and soothing. And as James grew into a toddler and then a little boy, Isaac taught him about the ranch, letting him help with small tasks, answering his endless questions with patience. 3 years after James was born, Katherine gave birth to a daughter. Elizabeth Rose Jackson came into the world on a cold December night, with snow falling softly outside. She was smaller than James had been, more delicate with Katherine's blue eyes and a rosebud mouth. James, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He wanted to hold her constantly, to show her his toys, to help take care of her. Katherine and Isaac watched their children together and felt their hearts overflow with gratitude for the family they had built. The ranch continued to grow. By 1882, they had one of the most respected herds in the county, known for quality stock. They had hired 2 more hands, built a bigger barn, and added rooms to the house to accommodate their growing family. Isaac's dream of a prosperous ranch that could support a family had come true, but it was so much better than he had imagined because he had Katherine to share it with. They still made time for each other, though. On clear nights, they would sit on the porch after the children were asleep, Isaac's arm around Katherine, and watch the stars. They talked about their dreams and plans, about the children's futures, about the life they were building together. "You ever think about that day?" Katherine asked one night. "The auction, I mean." "Sometimes," Isaac admitted. "I think about how scared you must have been. I think about how close you came to a terrible fate. And I think about how that awful situation brought you to me." "I think about it too," Katherine said softly. "And I think about how you did not hesitate. You saw something wrong happening and you stopped it, even though it cost you everything you had." "Best money I ever spent," Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. "I used to be so angry at my father," Katherine continued. "For his weakness, for his gambling, for selling me like I was nothing. But I realize now that I have let that anger go. What he did was terrible, but it brought me here to you, to this life. I have forgiven him, not because he deserves it, but because I do not want to carry that weight anymore." Isaac pulled her closer. "You are an amazing woman, Katherine Jackson. Do you know that?" She smiled. "You might have mentioned it once or twice." In 1885, when James was 7 and Elizabeth was 4, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first 2, leaving her tired and sick for months. Isaac worried constantly, hovering over her and trying to take on all her usual tasks on top of his own. "I am fine," Katherine insisted, though she appreciated his concern. "Women have babies all the time." "Not my wife," Isaac said firmly. "You are resting, and that is final." Margaret Henderson and the other ranch wives took turns coming to help with the children and the house, and for the first time, Katherine had to let others take care of her. It was strange and uncomfortable at first, but she gradually learned to accept help graciously. Their 3rd child, a daughter they named Sarah Ann, was born in October 1885. The birth was long and exhausting, and for a few terrifying hours, Isaac feared he might lose Katherine. But she was strong, his Katherine, stronger than anyone knew, and she came through it. Sarah was tiny but healthy, with red gold hair that seemed to come from nowhere in either family and green eyes that would later turn brown. With 3 children, the ranch house was full of noise and laughter and chaos. Isaac built more rooms, extending the house until it barely resembled the simple cabin it had been when Katherine first arrived. They had a proper parlor now, and individual bedrooms for the children, and a kitchen large enough for Katherine to work comfortably even with children underfoot. The children grew, each with their own personality. James was serious and responsible, fascinated by ranching and eager to learn everything his father could teach him. Elizabeth was creative and dreamy, always making up stories and drawing pictures. Sarah was the wild one, fearless and energetic, keeping her parents constantly on their toes. Isaac and Katherine watched their children grow with pride and wonder. They attended school in town during the winter months, riding in with Timothy, who had married a local girl and had children of his own now. In the summers, they worked on the ranch, learning the value of hard work and responsibility. By 1890, James was 12 and already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Elizabeth was 9 and had discovered a love of music, practicing on a piano Isaac had bought for her, hauled all the way from Kansas City at great expense. Sarah was 5 and mostly interested in following her older siblings around and getting into mischief. Katherine was 36 now, with threads of silver in her dark hair and laugh lines at the corners of her eyes. Isaac was 39, still strong and capable, though he moved a bit more carefully after a horse kicked him the previous year, cracking 2 ribs. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and injured horses, the 1,000 small crises that made up ranch life. And they had weathered them together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isaac took Katherine's hand. "Do you remember what I said the day I bought you your freedom? That you would have choices, that you could decide your own future?" "I remember," Katherine said, lacing her fingers through his. "I want you to know that is still true," Isaac said seriously. "If you ever want something different, if ranching is not enough, if you want to travel or live in a city or anything else, you just say the word. I want you to be happy, Katherine. That matters more to me than this ranch, more than anything." Katherine smiled, her eyes shining with love. "Isaac, I am happy, right here, right now, with you and our children. This ranch, this life we have built together, this is everything I ever wanted. I would not change a single thing." "Not even the beginning?" Isaac asked gently. "Not even the auction and everything that led to it?" Katherine considered for a moment. "The auction was terrible," she said slowly. "Being sold by my own father was one of the worst moments of my life, but it was also the moment I met you. And everything good in my life now came from that meeting. So no, I would not change it. I would not risk losing this, losing you, losing our family. Every hard thing I went through was worth it to end up here." Isaac pulled her close and kissed her, a kiss that held 15 years of love and partnership and shared struggles. When they broke apart, they sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the yard below, Scout barking and running with them. "We did good," Isaac said softly. "Yes," Katherine agreed. "We did very good." The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's growth. James became a skilled rancher, working alongside his father with easy competence. When he was 19, he married a neighbor's daughter, a sensible girl named Clara who was not afraid of hard work. They built a house on the far edge of the Jackson property, and James began building his own small herd with cattle his father gave him as a wedding present. Elizabeth, to everyone's surprise except Katherine's, announced at 17 that she wanted to be a teacher. She took the teaching examination and passed with high marks and began teaching at the local school. She boarded in town during the week and came home on weekends, full of stories about her students. Sarah, true to her wild nature, was the last to settle. She worked the ranch alongside her father and brother, proving she could ride and rope as well as any man. When she was 20, she married a cowboy named Robert who worked for Roy Henderson, and together they took over the Henderson Ranch when Roy retired. Isaac and Katherine became grandparents, and then grandparents again and again. James and Clara had 4 children. Elizabeth eventually married a widowed rancher with 2 children of his own and gave him 3 more. Sarah and Robert had twins, then another set of twins 2 years later, causing Katherine to joke that Sarah could never do anything by halves. The ranch house, which had grown so much over the years, filled regularly with children and grandchildren, loud family dinners and holidays celebrated together. Katherine cooked enormous meals, teaching her daughters and daughters-in-law the recipes she had perfected over the years. Isaac presided over the gathering with quiet contentment, grateful beyond words for the family he and Katherine had created. In 1910, Isaac and Katherine celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. Isaac was 59 now, his dark hair thoroughly gray, his face deeply lined by sun and weather and time. But his hazel eyes were still clear and sharp, still lighting up when he looked at his wife. Katherine was 56, her dark hair more silver than not now, but still beautiful in Isaac's eyes, still the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. They took a rare day away from the ranch, riding together to the top of the hill where Isaac had proposed so long ago. The view had not changed much. The ranch had expanded, the buildings were different, but the basic landscape was the same: rolling hills and prairie grass and that spectacular western sky. They sat in the grass, holding hands, comfortable in a silence born of decades together. "Do you remember the first time we came up here?" Katherine asked. "Every detail," Isaac said. "I was so nervous. I had practiced what I was going to say for days, but when the moment came, it all went out of my head." "I thought it was perfect," Katherine said. "I had been hoping you would ask for weeks." "Really? I thought I was hiding my feelings so well," Isaac said with a laugh. "You were terrible at it," Katherine teased. "Everyone could see we were in love. We were the last ones to admit it." Isaac turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Katherine, you know I am not much for flowery words. I am just a rancher, not a poet. But I want you to know that every day with you has been a gift. You took a broken-down ranch and a lonely man and turned them into a home and a family. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I love you more now than I did the day we married." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. After 32 years, he could still make her heart flutter with his words. "I love you too, Isaac. You saved my life, gave me a home, gave me a family. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love. I would not trade a single moment of our life together." They kissed, tender and sweet, two people who had built a life from nothing, who had turned tragedy into triumph through love and hard work and commitment to each other. As the sun set, they rode back down to the ranch, to the house filled with memories and love, to the life they had created together. And as they walked inside, Isaac's arm around Katherine's shoulders, they both knew that whatever years remained to them would be spent the same way the previous ones had been. Together. The ranch that Isaac had built and Katherine had helped shape continued to thrive, passing into the capable hands of their son James while they watched with pride. Their children were happy and successful, their grandchildren growing into fine young people, carrying forward the values of hard work and integrity that Isaac and Katherine had instilled in them. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Isaac and Katherine would sit on their porch and remember. They remembered a hot July day in 1875 when a young woman stood on an auction block and a young cowboy decided he could not walk away. They remembered the fear and uncertainty, but also the hope and growing love. They remembered building a life together, piece by piece, day by day, through hard times and good. They had started with nothing but each other, and somehow it had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything. Years later, long after both had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their grandchildren would tell the story of how they met, how Isaac had bought Katherine's freedom and then won her heart. It became a family legend, a romance for the ages, proof that even in the darkest circumstances, love could bloom and flourish. The ranch remained in the family for generations, Each new owner taught the history of the place, the story of Isaac and Catherine who had built it with love and sweat and unwavering commitment to each other. And every time a Jackson looked out over the rolling hills and prairie grass of their land, they remembered the cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him right back, and built a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. Their story was one of second chances and redemption, of seeing past circumstances to the person beneath, of choosing love even when it was not easy or convenient. It was a story of the West, of hard times and harder choices, but ultimately of hope and healing and happily ever after. Isaac had set Catherine free that day in St. Joe, but what he had not realized was that in doing so, he had freed himself too. Free from loneliness, from living half a life, from the grief and guilt that had haunted him since his sister's death. Together, they had found something precious and rare. True partnership, deep love, and a life well lived. And if you had asked either of them in those final peaceful years if they had any regrets, they would have said no, not a single one. Because every moment, every choice, every challenge had led them to each other and to the life they built together. And that made everything worthwhile. The sun set on the Jackson Ranch as it had set thousands of times before, painting the sky in gold and crimson and purple. And somewhere, in memory and legacy and the land itself, the love story of Isaac and Catherine lived on, a testament to the power of choosing kindness, of seeing the humanity in others, and of building something beautiful from the broken pieces life sometimes hands us. They had loved well, and that was the greatest achievement of all.